We've been calling it for the last couple of weeks our power panel. Not to put you guys on the hot seat or anything. And I'm just going to leave it at that and turn things over to Don DeCup.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Don DeCup. I'm Assistant Vice President for Advancement at the University of Washington. I run our Corporate Foundation Relations program. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. My goal is just not to screw this up. I heard you had a great day yesterday. If you start the day, they'll forget you. If you end the day and screw up, you'll be remembered forever. So my goal is to make sure we do this right. So it is my pleasure to serve as your facilitator this morning. We have a great panel of incredibly talented people here, and I want them to introduce themselves pretty quickly here. Kai?
I'm Kai Kamrath, Columbia University. I've been in this field for probably about 30 years. Started out as a student at UC Riverside, typing gift receipts, scrolling a multi-part form into a typewriter and hand typing. And have also been at UC Irvine, spent a number of years at the University of Washington, very enjoyable years. Spent some time with one of the software vendors in this field, and for about the past 10 years I've been at Columbia.
I'm Kyle Holmrest. I'm with the Ostar Group. I also have been in the field about 20 years, started annual giving, database segmentation, that sort of stuff, but that's about as far as my technology understanding goes. I have been with UW Medicine for about 5 years, most recently with the Women Part 2, and 2 years ago I started my own small consulting firm.
I'm Tracy Ostrom. I'm the Assistant Dean for Advancement in the College of Arts and Sciences. I've been in fundraising about 22 years. I started as a student caller at WSU and went through a path of annual giving, special events, major gift officer, and then into program management.
And I'm Walt Dreyfus, and I introduced myself to you yesterday.
Well, now if Tracy and I as career fundraisers might seem a little bit nervous, you've got to understand it's very rare that we get to be in a room with so many smart people at one time, especially if you consider faculty meetings and development holiday parties, so you'll understand why we might be a little bit nervous. But if you think about it, it might make sense to have a couple of career fundraisers involved in this morning's panel. We understand what you do, we appreciate what you do, and we're the beneficiaries of what you do. We could not do what we do without you. We have watched the anthropological evolution of your field, for those of us who have been in it long enough, and I would argue that I have watched the invention of your field. From the days of first-generation databases that followed card files, to working on simple file systems, to what is now today very complex and technical field that you have perfected in many, many ways. When I started in development at the University of Oklahoma in 1988, we had one of those first-generation databases, but over in the corner we kept the card files stacked up because we never knew if that damn thing was going to work every day or not. So we have watched this evolution over the years, and we want to talk a little bit about that landscape today. So whether you're at a small organization or a large organization, whether you're in higher education or another nonprofit, all of these topics relate to you. So we're going to look at the past, we're going to look at the present, we're going to look at the future, and we want to make sure you understand that this session will only work if you're engaged and ask a lot of questions. So I'm going to work the room like an old manual typewriter. If you have questions, we're going to make sure you get a chance to ask them. And, but I want to start with some kudos to our IM team at the University of Washington. We have an incredibly talented group there, and it is one of the reasons why, it's a very important reason why we have a very successful advancement program. Our team is committed to innovation, not just in a session like this conference, but they are unbound by the status quo. It is amazing what they do, what they invent on a daily basis. And in the university level, we like to talk a lot about entrepreneurial behavior. Our team is a true set of entrepreneurs, pioneers, and each and every one of them are their own little disruptive technology walking the hallways. Just go downstairs and there'll be proof there every day. So let's get started, all right? And I'm going to ask the first question, and it's kind of a career question, and so we'll start with Kai, and we'll go to Kyle across the panel. What role has the understanding of data and data-related systems played in your career?
Data systems. Well, the first time I really encountered sort of a modern type data system would have been in the early 80s, where we had in our office a word processing machine which sort of took up a corner of the office. And I found that I could take our address list that we had on the mainframe computer and on an addressograph machine, and I could put it into this thing in a sort of a quasi-spreadsheet and generate mailing labels. And that was kind of revolutionary. And we were able to generate labels at practically nil cost, whereas previously we had to pay huge sums of money to our central IT shop for these things. And that little spark of doing something that for me felt pretty self-evident, that you might just sort of harness this ability to do a word merge or word processing merge. And so I jumped from being, well, I remained a German lit major, but took this interest in technology and have sort of run with it ever since.
And I would say, when I started about 20 years ago, as I mentioned, it was annual giving, data segmentation. Looking through a donor pool on an Excel spreadsheet and trying to figure out how do I segment this to make sure that my direct mail appeals actually produce the most efficient and effective results. It's been a long time since then, and I have, throughout my career, I've kind of managed the operations side of fundraising. Annual giving, membership, event management, that sort of thing. And most recently, in my consulting business, I work with a lot of small nonprofits that technology has become kind of a double-edged sword. They know that they need high-level databases, they know that they need the technology, but they have yet the capacity or the infrastructure to add the knowledge to that. And so, of this panel, I'm probably going to have more questions than answers, because I'm representing the small and medium-sized nonprofits in the Puget Sound area that I deal with every day that have the same questions. How can I use this Blackbaud Razor's Edge database to the most effect? Do I work on the cloud? Do I work off the cloud? That sort of thing. So it's been an arc in my career, kind of tangentially, but it's incredibly important to the clients that I work with every day now.
I would say for me, it's not so much the working with the information and how it's changed, but it's the people who I work with in that role. I just think as throughout my career, in whatever role I'm in, I love to invest in that relationship as a part of I consider it our extended team, because I don't consider myself an expert in it, so I like to bring those individuals onto the team, spend time with them, understand what they do, and just really trust them. And I think throughout my career, in every role, I've just really valued that relationship. I think annual giving sort of gave me my first experience with working with data. And so that was a really important learning experience for me. And then from them, from there, I've just been able to invest in those relationships with my IM colleagues.
It's a tough question. I think that the data and data-related systems are all tools that we use, and it's a incredibly frustrating tool set to try to deal with. The idea that one can push a button and get something is prevalent among our clients and colleagues, and I spend a lot of time attempting to disabuse them of that concept. I have a terrible memory for names, and so databases have always been a refuge for me because I can figure out how to find out who people are using them. But I'm really more interested in the systems that are inclusive of the people to make things happen, and operating organizations that include technology toward the ends of the mission of the institution or the societal goals we're trying to accomplish. And so I think that it's played a role because it's given me something to do that an introverted person can do without having to go out of the basement to which he's been relegated, and that makes me happy.
I heard your performance yesterday. It was very introverted. Guy, how would you describe the current state of information management and advancement, and what do you think is the most critical issue we face today?
Well, anyone who was here yesterday afternoon will know security is high amongst our concerns. Columbia is in a very large capital campaign right now, and we like to think that we're all playing some role in hitting that goal, including those of us in the back of the house, even though we're not asking for the dollars. One of the things that we're importantly charged with is making sure that our data remains secure. Because the thing you really don't want to have happen when you're in a $5 billion campaign is for something to hit the front of the New York Times, announcement saying that Columbia's systems have been breached and donor records and prospect information is being dispersed, etc. So security is something that really does keep some of us up and many sleepless nights.
Does anybody remember the years we'd go to Microsoft, we'd hand them a list of our people, they'd hand us a list of their people? Those were great days, right? Walt, what do you think is the biggest issue, a critical issue we face today?
Well, the challenge that I face all the time are the expectations that are created by the deployment of things like eBay and Amazon.com and Google. I've read that Amazon, for example, has invested over $1.2 billion in their user interface and all of the data sets that lie underneath it to give the customer a personalized experience. And those kinds of personalized experiences are exposed to everybody, including the president of our institution or the CEO of your nonprofit. And they create these expectations that we can never, ever meet. We don't have the capacity. In fact, we're really cheap, and we pinch a penny or a dollar till the eagle screams. And so the vendors that come into our space, and there's 3,500, 3,600 total four-year colleges and universities in the country. There's no big bucks for vendors in this space, relatively speaking. So frankly, we don't get the first-rate vendors. And it's that space between the expectations that are created by the best IT and what we can do that is a real challenge for us, and it gets worse every year.
Two words that were used, one usability, the other effectiveness. Tracy, in terms of your fundraising staff and their ability to use and interface with our systems, use the data, how important is that in their overall effectiveness as fundraisers?
It's come a long way over the last 10 years, and I look for it. It's not a critical piece because of that relationship we have with IM. What I do see is, as we've experienced a lot of budget cuts, it may be a skill that I look for a little bit more, because how we do things, we have to be more efficient, we have to use our resources better, and so it's definitely something I would value in a skill set. And that's not necessarily what I would have looked for in a fundraiser 10 years ago.
Certainly not you and me, right?
Yeah.
We're hanging on by our fingertips on those things, right? Kyle, you work with a lot of small organizations, and in this era of budget cuts, you mentioned effectiveness and efficient use of resources, and we're very lucky at the University of Washington. We have an enormous team of very talented people. But there are a lot of organizations that have 1- to 2-person shops. What are the issues there that relate to overall effective use of both technologies and the data that they involve?
I mean, simply put, it's knowledge. And that's one of the reasons I'm so happy and proud to be here today. This is a first step toward assisting some of the smaller and medium-sized organizations that don't have the capacity to bring on people like that, actually help increase their knowledge so that technology doesn't outpace them every day. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of my clients spend the money for the best-of-breed database that they can afford and don't have the knowledge base within their own staff structure to actually take advantage of the bells and whistles that they've just purchased. And so making sure that the knowledge base of my clients matches up with the technologies that they've purchased is key. And so that's, this is a first great step, having all of you people in the room. And hopefully we'll continue to grow, and more smaller to medium-sized organizations will join the big guys to share some of that knowledge.
So a question for all 4 of you. If your boss would give you a big pile of money tomorrow, what would you do with it?
Really?
Does that include vacation plans?
Well, see, that's where my head went.
Kai, what would you do with it?
Well, yeah, looking at self-interest, we have one of the, I guess, sort of market-leading database systems right now, but I think it's a little long in the tooth. So I would be back in the market looking for something a little more up-to-date, which might not get quite to the point of giving the sort of the Facebook experience that Walt mentioned, but would serve the fundraisers a bit better. I think the fundraisers' interaction with the systems ought to be quick and painless. They need to be able to go in, get what they need, get out. Because ultimately what we pay them for, nice salaries, is to raise money. You know, we want them to meet with prospects. We want them to talk to prospects and bring those gifts in. So we don't really want them spending a lot of idle time in the system. So the systems need to respond to them, and I think we could do with an upgrade.
Kyle, you're your own boss.
I was
What would
going
you
to
do with
say,
your own
since I'm
pile
the
of money?
boss, what would I do with my money aside from fishing? I would say, you know, I'd invest in some additional training programs that my firm could provide to small organizations. Again, knowledge is the key. So investing in opportunities to connect with my clients and to offer them the learning experience that they need.
Here's my shameless pitch for my position. We did get additional money this year from my dean, and we're investing in a data position. We're a little antiquated in some of our systems in arts and sciences on the stewardship side and data side, and we just see it as a critical piece of empowering our frontline team to get out so they don't need to worry about it. And so that's where we're investing our dollars this year.
And that's going to bridge your local systems with the central system.
With this, exactly.
By antiquated, Tracy means they're operating out of binders. Actually, I would frankly give most of it back, depending on how big the pile was. I could use a couple of my bosses in the audience. I know what's the right answer. No, but we are people in support. We serve the institution and the fundraising mission here. We need more frontline fundraisers. We've got over 10,000 qualified prospects who are unassigned out there. It would be disproportionate to take a pile of money and invest it in advancement services when we still have that big of a gap between the number of identified prospects and the number of fundraisers that are deployed to do it. We are good enough at what we do in the technology side to support more people, and the key and critical investment for us right now would not be in advancement services.
Information overload is not a new term. Alvin Toffler coined it in his 1970 book, Future Shock. In 2011, Kai, how close do you think we are to reaching information overload?
I don't know that we are. But our challenge is to take all those data and ratchet it up a level and turn it into something more than just data. And of course, the more we have to build on, the more we can sort of make it information instead of just data. So I don't know that we are there yet.
Well,
But I agree. I think that there's a lot of talk about information overload, but if you take out the pornography and the overt sales and marketing stuff and actually try to find out factual information about people and places and things and events, it's very hard to discern. And I think the challenge is really the developing the capacity to filter and think for yourself about your information and where it's coming from and why people are giving it to you in the way that they do. There's not enough information out there as far as I'm concerned. I can't find out what I want to know. I can't find out what the paint formula for my 1995 Harley Davidson was so that I can patch some chips on it. The company doesn't make it anymore and they don't know. And you can't find that information. This is only 16 years ago. not out there. So it depends on what you're looking for, but yeah, there's not enough information out there.
This was alluded to earlier. So Tracy, as a manager of frontline fundraisers, we often joke about a term, analysis paralysis, among our frontline fundraisers, right? There's some fundraisers who think they need more and more information before they can get out and make calls. As a manager of these fundraisers, how do you draw the line?
That's a great question. It's one that I'm pretty firm with when I see it happening. I mean, as Walt was saying, we need our frontline teams to not immerse themselves in data and keep ordering lists. You know, somebody's warmer, somebody's better, there's somebody I'm missing, there's somebody I'd rather meet with, and those are in my portfolio. And we really, we just track to metrics. And if people spend their time doing what we pay them to do, which is go out and visit with people and trust that the data you have is good, then everyone will be more successful. But there can be a tendency with a certain style to just immerse yourself in data and binders and track it, when the reality is, as a frontline fundraiser, we need to just go out and meet with people, because as good as the data is, I think the value of the conversation is so important.
Kyle, let's talk about competition for a second. You know, in the nonprofit world, we're loath to talk about competition frequently, when in truth, the percentage of giving in this country since World War II compared to GDP has stayed almost virtually the same. So Kyle, the question here is, in terms of technology, has technology leveled the playing field and allowed smaller nonprofits to compete more effectively against larger and more sophisticated university fundraising programs?
I think the easy answer is no. I think the capacity to do that is there, but meaning that the technology is there, the information is there, but there's not a lot of time to actually go gather it. I would love for my clients to be able to figure out what sort of questions to ask, so that they could figure out what data to request, what data to actually input, and how to pull it out of their database system. I mean, it's as basic as that. I'm running into small clients that are launching capital campaigns with no idea of who's in their database and what sort of prospects they have. And these are, I'm not talking $200,000 capital campaigns. These are $2 million, $5 million, $12 million capital campaigns with a prospect pool of 50. The top 50 are making $5,000 gifts a year, and they're still launching a $12 million capital campaign. So that tells me that there is not enough knowledge in the organization to be able to make those effective decisions.
Where does that start? With leadership?
That's a good question. I think all the way from the top, from board members down to executive directors and CEOs of these organizations, they recognize the need for that funding, especially if they're launching into a capital campaign mode, and they recognize the technology because they've been through the arc of transition that we've seen over the course of the last 10 or 12 years. So when they lean on their development director to say, go find these people, we need more prospects, and the development director doesn't really know how to effectively do that, that's a challenge. And so I think it's from the top down. I think knowledge about databases and data integrity and the right questions to ask and the right information to put in has to start from the CEO and the executive director, the board members, on down to the frontline data staff.
So let's unpack this issue a little bit more. I think this is really important. So you've identified a gap.
Yes.
So is this gap, panel, an issue of awareness, education, and training, or is it about translation? So you're saying, in large, we have the data there, we have the information there, maybe we're not translating it, but it's awareness, education. So how do we do a better job as it results to this upstream, downstream issue that results in greater effectiveness for organizations? Do we do more training? Do we create greater awareness? What's the solution here? Tracy.
We have a couple of mini campaigns on the horizon with some of our colleagues across the arts, because it's so need focused right now, and we try to get away from that, and we use the information. And so we start with the training of the executive director. The directors of advancement typically realize it, but they just need support. They need the backing to translate the information with credibility to the museum heads or the school directors, and we just take it and we plop it into pyramids and share the data with them so they can see what the feasibility looks like and how likely they are for success. So I think where we really get on the academic side or the leadership side is the lights kind of come on when it's translated for them.
Walt?
It's a training issue from my perspective. We need to teach people to connect the dots between, as Tracy says, a prospect pyramid and a campaign goal with just some of the standard metrics we use. 3 prospects at a certain level to get a single gift at that level. Going into a $12 million campaign with nothing but presumably or insufficiently rated $5,000 donors is a pretty tough proposition. Folks are adopting the idea of a campaign without understanding what the building blocks of a campaign are, and frankly, it's not data related. You can show them a prospect pyramid with a piece of paper and a Rolodex.
Yes.
Kai, final thoughts?
Well, yeah, final thought. What came to my mind is that this sort of thing also happens on the opposite end of the spectrum. There's a very large institution in LA, South Central LA, that recently announced a $6 billion campaign. And all of us were thinking, like, they must be smoking crack, these people. How do they think they can raise that kind of money? But, perhaps there's a lot they don't know, and perhaps it's a 20-year campaign, who knows. But I'll be interested to see how well they do with that.
Yeah, that's a good point. The campaign paradigm has shifted. You ask USC, you're in a campaign, it's $6 billion. When's it going to end? We're in a $6 billion campaign. The y-axis goes on forever, right? So thank you. That big yellow thing in the sky that doesn't appear on the
It's burning me.
Well, so I provided most of these questions, but not all of them, and I saved the ones I didn't provide for Walt. Walt, what's the big thorny issue in information management that no one wants to talk about?
Well, clearly after Kirk, it's the gummy bear issue. I don't know. There's no answer to that one, Dondi, because I try to operate in an environment where we talk about everything, however painful it might be. I think that the data security one is one that is just outrageously scary. I'm with Kirk. I'm on the assumption of breach side of things, and the fact is that all the security in the world doesn't help me raise a dollar. It just doesn't work. The thing that we are talking about is making the transition from trying to hold all our data in a database to farming it from wherever it resides and is most closely watched. So we might be the best people for addresses. Obviously, the student database is the best source for degree information. Why am I importing degree information when it's already sitting over there in another database? I shouldn't have to do that. And that's what I'm thinking about. But I don't ask my staff what we don't talk about. That would be my blind spot because I try to talk about all those things.
Okay. There are at least...
Bring it. Bring it.
Hi, please. Okay.
He would.
I think we are in a period of time where there are a lot of people, consultants, companies, that are building tools that are better than what we've traditionally had and cheaper. And I think for a while I was on the side of why are we letting people go out and buy things for their department or their unit or their school. But the more I look at these tools, the more I'm starting to think that maybe the model going forward is that we let people try those things out and we work on how we connect those things. And I think Walt sort of hit on this with, one of the things Web 2.0 gives you the opportunity to do is really easily connect disparate bits of information and sort of present them to the user together. So Zillow doesn't work if they have to store all that information in one server. It works because they can go out and grab information, mitigate it, and present it to you. I've seen lots of things that people at our school have looked at that just are flat out better than our CRM. And it's getting harder and harder to say, no, you need to you need to fit into this model of our sort of central tool when there are better options out there.
Even if that contributes to the creation of shadow databases and units?
I actually, contrary to popular belief, I'm not anti-shadow database. It would be nice if all of our information was centralized, but it's just not going to be. I think telling people that they can't put together the tools they need to do their job is counterproductive. I'd much rather say, you know what, I prefer that you be in the central database, but you have a need here that I'm not able to meet. So let's figure out how we can address both and make sure those things are connected.
I can tell you from a CFR standpoint, one of our Achilles heels at UW is in the 80s when people were starting to buy products off the shelf, we built our own. And so rolling forward, they weren't updated, and now the systems don't talk to each other, so we have little buckets of very important data that don't roll up. At a conference this summer, PIN, I think, has a system where you can push a button and tell what the economic value of your relationship with IBM from continuing education and purchasing and advancement and OSP rolled up into one database, and we all just gasp because we can't do that, right? And it's a real liability in terms of trying to identify the current state of our relationships. That information is incredibly powerful, right? Any other follow-ups?
I think that this is part of the point of the technology. The problem that we face anytime somebody needs a solution to something isn't that we can't program the solution. The barrier there isn't that we don't have enough programming time to come up with something innovative and interesting. The amount of time that it takes to fully analyze the problem, come up with a process that really meets the needs, and deliver that in such a way, because that sounds like a great solution, but you have to go out and visit each one of those data sources and figure out how it's going to roll up and how the information relates to each other. And the purchase is the easy part. It's all of that back-end work to actually make it interoperate. And I think if you've got a lot of STEM systems, what I've lost then is probably my most important ability, which is to guarantee that there's an institution-wide relationship with a prospective donor that is in the donor's best interest and renewing for them, and also in the overall institution's best interest rather than in the interest of one particular school that may not want to play well with others.
And of course, you have to identify the costs associated with that ambitious effort, the scope, the cost, and the time associated with it. And in this day and age, those resources are hard to come by, right? Any other follow-ups? Yes, over here.
Technology. Basically, we use technology to support our functions, to help us out and advance ourselves. But is it getting to the point where we're using it as a crutch now? Are we too dependent on technology and forget about the people? Walt said that, I don't need to invest in more technology, I need more people. Are we losing the people skills? Because we're depending so much on the technology itself.
Kai, you want to take that
one? Well, I don't know that we are. Assuming a good ratio between fundraiser and support staff, again, like I said earlier, I really want to know that fundraisers are out on the pavement talking to prospects and spending that one-on-one face time. They need to have access to the system just to get in, get what they need, and get out again, and so that they can do what they do best. And I don't think that we can make fundraising into any more of a science. It really is an art. And I think if we can capitalize on that, then that leads to better relationships with prospects, and that'll end up with more gifts and pledges to the institution.
Let's actually follow that line in terms of knowledge management, right? If you follow Boeing builds airplanes down the road, they have a huge knowledge management issue because a significant number of their engineers are going to retire in the next 10 years. In advancement, we face a similar problem. So in the information management side, there's a data and information driven side, but on the fundraiser side, we're still a very verbal culture, okay? And we do our best to upload those relationships, those contacts, those anecdotes, right? And so there's got to be a meshing of those two. So in that verbal culture we exist, what's the other problem we face? That's tremendous turnover in our fundraising staff, okay? And we do a lot of things to try to solve that. But how do we continue to proactively deal with that in terms of our systems, both human systems and our more technical systems? How do we deal with the issue of knowledge management rolling forward? Tracy?
I'll take it. I'm a huge advocate of getting that information into the database. Turnover, I accept it, I acknowledge it, it's going to happen. I'm grateful when it doesn't happen, but it kills me when the information, the contact reports are not tracked and they're not entered. And so I think if it's something we value, we acknowledge in our review process, that when folks are good at it, when they actually do it, and we recognize it and reward it, I find that the fundraisers will do it. On the faculty side, that's actually the more complicated piece, is when we have the administrative turnover, the faculty turnover. The fundraisers are pretty good at it, but it's on the institution side, on the non-advancement side, where I find it really painful.
Walt?
I think you have to go ask the donor. We've got people, one of our most fabulous supporters, William H. Gates Sr., graduated with a law degree, I think in 1950, 52, something like that. I don't even have any gift history for him until 1973. I know he was giving before then. The relationship, the first 25 years of his relationship with the University of Washington is not anywhere in the system. And yet we have a fabulous relationship with the man. And it's because of the interpersonal interaction. And I think that there is a way for people to just pick it up. We're never going to be able to memorialize and digitize relationships in a way that makes it seamless. And the problem is really then the uptake. How long does it take that new frontline fundraiser to come in, develop those relationships, and get to know that 50-year plus 60-year now history of Mr. Gates' relationship with the university? I wasn't doing it in the first place.
Kyle, topic of knowledge management in your field?
Well, with the organizations that I work with, most of the time, they're very small staffs. They're executive director, maybe a development director, and then administrative support. The one thing that they have, and it's what makes them successful as they stand, is the relationship building skills with the prospects. The thing that they don't have is the knowledge about, okay, that information is valuable for future cultivation strategy development. They don't think that far. So they create the relationships, they have them in the Rolodex, they know to say hi at whatever event they see them at, but they don't capture the data so that they can't look back and say, this is what we spoke about the last 2 or 3 times, so the next time I speak to them, this is something I'm going to bring up to draw them closer from a cultivation standpoint. So we don't have, on the smaller client side, we don't have a technology. The technology is there. It's the understanding, the true understanding of how to use it to further the relationships to engender those major gifts. I mean, most of my clients are stuck on the donor pyramid at the event level, right? They do the annual giving, they do the events, they leave the rest of the money on that, the 80-20 rule, they leave the rest of the money on the table because they don't know how to further those relationships and build solid cultivation strategies for pulling people closer.
Kai?
Something Tracy mentioned really resonated for me. I've been in that situation where a key fundraiser leaves an institution. This was some number of years ago. And takes with them literally everything in their head about where they were with the whole portfolio of prospects. Contact reports were not very well enforced in years past, and this entire, what should be institutional knowledge has walked out the door. We have no idea where we are with these people. The successor coming into that role can look at the gift history and have some idea of what's been happening in that school, but has no idea where the current prospects are. So that's just a heinous thing. Now, of course, we can try to make it as easy as possible. I'd like to get where fundraisers can just speak their contact reports into a recording device and have it routed that way. And luckily, those technologies are improving all the time. We've been waiting for that for some time, but they're certainly getting better. But we're not quite there yet.
Any follow-up questions?
Yes, I wanted to just make a comment in terms of the balance between the technology and the fundraisers. So has anybody used profiles in advance? I think Matt can speak to profiles because he's an expert at creating profiles. Because what it does basically is if you have your foundation and corporate relations people, for instance, if you create a specific profile, which means that when people log on to their front page, it gives them a lot of information that allows them to get in and get out quickly. That's one profile. You can set it up for your alumni relations people. You can set it up for your fundraisers. And we've put that to quite an extensive use, and it has been very effective at helping your fundraisers, your frontline people get into the system and get out pretty quickly, having the information they need. So just as an example, you could have your top 25 prospects right on your homepage, and you could click on the link and then go to whatever information you need. You could have your last 5 reports that you've run, for instance, that you could go to if you know that you only use 5 kind of reports, you know, your standardized reports that you hang off your menu. And so there's a whole bunch of things that you can do with the profile in advance, is what we're talking about, that really helps the efficiency. And we'd be happy to give a demonstration. If people haven't used profiles, Matt is great at that, so
Anyone else?
Dondi, I would just add something to that. One of my new favorite features in the advanced database is tasks. I think as frontline staff, where we really struggle and where I see us struggling is trying to remember the next steps. What am I going to do with this person in 60 days, in 90 days? It's the prompt, remind, facilitate role of our IM colleagues and prospect research colleagues, but I think that is such a crucial role for frontline because it's an overwhelming amount of information. You forget what you say you're going to do and when you're going to do it. But I've started using the task section, and I just love it. I am a huge fan of it.
So that leads me to ask the next question. Pardon my editorial comment here, but I don't feel that we use true CRM systems like the business sector uses. So why don't we use CRM systems, fully integrated CRM systems like the corporate sales sector uses? Okay?
Walt alluded earlier to the fact that our industry is really comparatively small compared to large corporate America. What was it, 3,600 higher eds in the country, and that probably includes a lot of fairly small shops. Not to mention the really big ones. So it's a tough market niche to get into. The companies that are in that market niche, some don't have more than a couple dozen employees. Very often it's no more than 1 dozen. Even the largest may have a couple hundred people working in development, software development. But it's not that big. So we don't keep pace, unfortunately, with what the big corporations are doing.
Well,
I went to a panel that included the Chief Information Officer for the Nordstrom Corporation, and we asked him about his level of investment in their CRM. And he said that they postponed the opening of 3 big box stores for 4 years in order to put in their system. So that he didn't say how much it cost. That was just as close as he was willing to get. But let's say it was somewhere north of $250 million. And what he's trying to do is sell shoes. It's actually an easier job than we have. They're very single-minded. They want to identify the people that are most likely to buy, just like we are. The marketing person told me that one of the first things they did after they put that system in was that they used it and identified the people most likely to buy. They invited them in for a special evening that was only that group of people, and they at one store, at the flagship store here in Seattle, and they cleared $25 million in one night by inviting the right crowd in. So it worked. It's going to, or has already paid off. But so answer 1 is level of investment. But answer 2 also has to do with the complexity of what we're trying to accomplish. We do not have a single product or a single product set to sell to people, and our level of analysis to get at whether an individual is interested in cancer or dance, it presents an additional challenge.
Kyle, any thoughts on CRM?
I like what Walt said. That's above my pay grade.
All right. So if I put you all under oath, at least two of you would have to admit, starting in this business when we were still using card files. I'm not going to do that. So I want you to look and think actually over the course of your careers and tell us what single technology tool or approach has had the greatest impact on your work. Okay?
Well, I think I mentioned it earlier. It was an early word processing machine where I just realized, hey, this has potential. And that sort of put me on this particular trajectory.
That's when senior managers had dot matrix printers in their office.
Oh, they didn't have any printers in their offices. This is pre-PC. Yeah, we had an addressograph machine, so that's as close as we got to technology.
Okay.
Instead of going back, I'm going to go forward. I think that for many of my clients, I think the Web 2.0 cloud-based database CRM systems are for them the wave of the future, because they don't have the support staff to maintain servers. They don't have support staff to run that kind of stuff. So to actually have something in which they can house their data effectively that's relatively intuitive as far as data input and data extraction will be huge. It's just a matter of what I found is the support structure on the database side is a little bit lacking. And so, again, it goes back to the training issue. So I think cloud-based data management systems will be where my clients go from a cost-effectiveness perspective, but also an ease of use of perspective. So now we just need, again, to bring the knowledge base up to the level of the technology.
Tracy?
I don't really, pass.
Well, you get one pass.
Okay, yeah.
Well, I've been around for the birth and development of the relational database, which has been really important to me. But I think that the pendulum swing that I'm seeing is that I was in mainframe world at the beginning with Rolodexes on the side and card stacks. You actually had to fill out an 11 by 17 sheet that had a little box, and each box had a particular data element in it, so you needed to know which set of boxes was entity ID and so forth. And you fill that out, and you had a whole sheet. You take it over to the punch card people, and they would make you a card stack. And this was at Berkeley, and then you'd mail it to Fresno, where the mainframe for all 9 campuses was. So what's funny now is that the cloud is just another iteration of the mainframe. And we've moved through this whole cycle of everything's on the desktop or in a server that fits under the desk. And now we're going back to mainframe. And what we don't know, and what Kirk was talking about in terms of cloud business models, is that we used to have to pay for storage and cycles, that is I/O cycles, on mainframes. And that was how they supported the mainframe. We're going to see that. My future prediction is that we will see that the business model of the cloud has to go back to paying for storage and IOs, or some version thereof. So the more things change, the more they remain the same. And then I guess the next step in technology that I'm finding really interesting is it's not precisely a technology. I characterize it as just the capacity to source data from multiple places and aggregate it without having to own it particularly is looking really fun.
So each of you alluded a little bit to the future, so let's go down that path and talk about whether it's more about cloud computing, our ability to collect massive amounts of data, store massive amounts of data, use high-performance computing to sort and segment, do modeling. Let's talk about information management in the year 2030. I think that's the year I'm supposed to retire, according to TI Prep. What does information advancement IM look like in the year 2030? From hardware to software to reporting to our interfaces, what does it look like? Okay?
take
Yeah, that is an awfully long time in technology. I mean, if you think back in 20 years past what it looked like, and then compared to today, I can't fathom how it would be different. Certainly, I think the whole notion of the cloud and the movement of data, it's not all going to be in that little box in the room down the hall or with the air conditioning unit. But what the end user experience, geez, I don't know. I greatly look forward to it is all I can say, but I have no idea really what that might be.
Tracy?
I think about it from the donor perspective and our relationships in the front line, and I think how we interact and work with our donors, I don't see that changing a whole lot. I mean, it's a personal relationship, and they'll expect us to know more about them and to be more service-oriented and track specific interests. But I think from the donor perspective, we'll be able to do such a better job at knowing what their specific interests are. But I look at it from I don't think the relationship-based aspect of what we do on the frontline side will change. What we do behind the scene, I can't even begin to predict that. I would defer to Walt on that. But, I mean, the relationships aren't going to change.
I wouldn't want to try to predict what the technology will be, but I think that consistent with what the gentleman in the back there was saying about the profile is that what the technology will do is it will provide an increasingly personalized experience for each individual user, and that we're going to be struggling in that direction. The struggle, I'm actually hoping, will be mitigated by the occurrence of the singularity. For those of you who don't know what the singularity is, it's when all of a sudden a computer attains sentience. So I'm actually hoping for that.
And by the way, Paul Allen wrote an editorial two weeks ago that said we have not reached the singularity. So Paul Allen says that it must be true. Right?
Well, and of course, the first thing that will happen when the singularity occurs was that I will be shut out of the airlock. So.
Kyle, did you answer?
I haven't, but you know what I'm going to say won't take until 2030. And I loved the voice recognition idea. I mean, for people to be able to just speak a contact report and have it end up in the right place would be great. Another thing that I'm really looking forward to is an opportunity for my clients as well as other small to medium-sized nonprofits to be able to pool their data together without there being security challenges or territory issues, so that predictive modeling can take place on a larger scale and then have the modeling passed back to the clients for use. I would love to see that at some point soon.
So now let me weigh in. So having been in this business 24 years, I can tell you, I'm known for making ridiculous statements on a daily basis, and one of them recently was, what did we do before email? And somebody younger than me was near, and they said, what did we do before email? I said, we wrote a lot of memos. Remember that, Connie? Connie Kravis, this is our vice president. Connie, wave your hand if you don't know Connie. There's Connie. We wrote a lot of memos, and I think they said, what's a memo? We wrote a lot of memos. We had typewriters. The other day I needed to type an envelope. I don't know why. Could not find a typewriter on the floor of our building, right? And I earned a degree in journalism on a typewriter, so, you know, I'm feeling like a really important tool wasn't there. But we didn't have email. We didn't have PCs. I remember we had the first 286s, and if you were lucky, a dot matrix printer that would print a line every minute. And so for me, it's the combination of the volume of data, the speed in which you can access the data, and the ease in which you can access the data. And then, of course, things like this, right? These smartphones, you know, what's this picture? A dumb guy with a smartphone, right? These kinds of tools that are continued to evolve and develop, that are going to make it easy for fundraisers to be more nimble. And again, we've talked about effectiveness. We're all looking at effectiveness, right? How do we do more with less? And that is our challenge going forward, right? Because we're seeing less, not more investments in us from our institutions. And so how are we going to be more creative and poised in position to maximize the use of tools like this going forward in the years ahead? So it's going to be an interesting challenge for us. So we're at a point now I want to open it up for some questions. I know you've been thinking about some questions. I want to make sure whatever the topic is, we've covered a wide range of topics here this morning. So let's hear from you. What questions do you have? Back corner over here.
Just a question about more of the collaborative type software that's available. As an example, GoToMeeting, where people can be in literally different states, but they can be having a meeting together. And so that technology is really beginning to take off. It's very expensive still, but I know Cisco, for instance, and this is not a paid advertisement, but Cisco Systems, for instance, they're really developing that kind of collaborative software where you have some really high-end video equipment that can, what it will do basically is it'll show if you have 6 different people from 6 different schools in 6 different states, they'll show it all on one screen, and if one person is talking, that image gets bigger on the screen, for instance, so you can literally see that person speaking. And so it's, I really feel like that's where probably before 2030, a lot of our technology is headed. But does anybody know more about that?
Panelists, anyone here? So very evolved video conferencing technology. Yeah. Someone else back here had a question. Someone else in the, go ahead.
One of the things that I think we talk a lot about in my organization is the balance between knowing our customers and our prospects and privacy issues. I don't know, I would like the panel to talk a little bit about that. Like how do you balance all the stuff that we know about our donors, being able to talk to them in a personalized way, and then potential privacy issues?
Including things like HIPAA and other factors, right?
Absolutely.
Tracy, you want to take that one?
I don't necessarily put everything in the database related, if there's a HIPAA issue or an illness, but I haven't really ran into it on the donor side. I don't share everything I know about them because we know so much, and it can be probably a little intimidating, but it's so important to have that information to ask the kind of questions you need to ask to move the relationship forward. So I'm a big fan of the information. I love to use the information and incorporate it into my strategies. So I haven't really ran into it, but there's definitely certain information we wouldn't want to necessarily put in email or put in the database, and just how we delicately do it is the most important issue.
And sometimes we edit information out. Walt, you want to follow up there?
We're in one of the brightest of the sunshine states right here, and there's probably, is untested judicially, but there's probably no data in the database that isn't accessible through a public records request. None, period. I believe that many bits of information, as Tracy alludes to, are expurgated. I often wonder what goes on that doesn't appear there, but I think it's totally appropriate for it not to be there. And so the balance is, again, back to Kirk, it's assumption of breach. And whether the breach comes through a public records request or it comes through a hacker coming in, every piece of data you have, if you can't show it to the donor, then my attitude is don't keep it, because doing it otherwise is going to hurt you more than it is going to help you to have the information.
Yeah, you're having a really bad day when you get that request that says, give me any and all information on blank, right? That's how you define a bad day.
The only information I don't put in is someone's relationships, healthcare, and drinking habits.
You guys, any follow-up there? All right. Another question? Over here.
Going on that same line, is the line between, is technology pushing that line between public and private information then, for your field? I mean, as you go forward, technology is getting better, reflecting more data. Is that line between public and private information getting pushed? So, is public getting bigger, private getting smaller?
Okay, what do you think?
Well, it's a very different issue for us since we're a private institution, and so we don't need to worry about disclosure quite like the publics do. However, as I mentioned earlier, security is of such a concern, and the notion that a database might be breached is something that frightens us a lot. Really, what's related here is something that I think a lot about is what are the ethics of what kind of information we should be going out collecting, and is it something that we ought to, for example, anyone who's on Facebook who installs one of the applications, and a lot of universities have alumni association applications, and as soon as you create that, you can go in and harvest all the information about those people. So is that okay? Is that a fine thing to do? Now, they've given you implicitly, explicitly actually, they've given you permission to do that. Does that mean you go and collect all the information about all their friends and whom they know and all their photographs and their educational and career background and what their political interests, their personal interests? You know, you have access to all that. Is that okay to bring that in?
So just from a technical standpoint, I've read the terms of service, and you can't.
You cannot?
It's a violation of the terms of service to collect it and store that information.
So you can go in and look at it all, but you cannot store it elsewhere.
Same with
Okay.
LinkedIn. So with the LinkedIn API, you can have them authorize you to pull up and populate a web page with their information. You can allow them to then give you permission to pull that information into your website. But you can't make a direct call and scrape data.
Okay. Well, what about other ways of getting data nowadays? You know, every time I go to the grocery store, you swipe that card, they're keeping track of what I'm buying. They know if I buy the good wine or the cheap stuff. They know what my tastes are, whether I'm vegetarian or vegan or whatever. You know, they know all that about you. And of course, they're collecting the information because they can turn around and sell it. And so theoretically, we could go out and get a portfolio of what the tastes and habits of our alumni. Is that fair game?
You know, and I should add, kind of presumption is that a lot of people do that anyway, even though it isn't, you know, it's technically a violation in terms of service.
Yeah.
When you read on the developer network and on other sites, I mean, people are doing it anyways.
So let me add a little odd twist to this. So inside our organization, should there be more control on the access to data and reports that we provide inside our organizations? Should fundraisers have access to any and all reports they want anytime? Should there be greater controls inside our organization? Tracy?
I'll take that. It's not so much the fundraisers that concerns me, it's the faculty. When in large institutions with administrators, we have 40 departments and 40 chairs and administrators. It's the faculty and administrative access to our information, and how do we manage that? And how we've gone through the budget cuts from a push system to a pull system, so they have to have a reasonable amount of knowledge about the database to access it. But that's where I struggle, is on the academic or faculty side for someone who's fundraising for a project or thinks they want to be a fundraiser, is accessing that information, and how do we support them in accessing it. But we can't necessarily get it all to them, so they actually have to be sophisticated enough to pull it out. But it's that's what I struggle with.
Walt?
I serve on the Data Management Committee of the University of Washington, and this is always a hot topic. About 2 years ago, we made the decision to make all financial data available to everyone who has a basic access to financial information at the university. This was revolutionary. Prior to that, nobody was able to see somebody else's budget or compensation or something like that. And what's ironic about that, again, in our public space, is that any citizen could ask for that information and get it through a public records request, but employees with a legitimate business interest to know couldn't know unless the administrator of that area did it. And so we made this revolutionary choice to open it up. And the premise is that we're a community of trust. We trust you, we trust our colleagues to use it for legitimate business interests and not to abuse the privilege. And with that comes some capacity for enforcement and corrective action up to dismissal if people are found to be misusing the data. And actually that's the policy level approach to this that I prefer, rather than trying to manage data on the column and row level. So to give you another example, payroll deduction is a powerful tool in our organization for giving. And if you're trying to manage data access on a column and row level, what you're saying is, okay, so we're going to make available data that's in certain spaces, certain fields, and not in other fields. But in the payroll deduction space, we want to see all the payroll deductions that are gifts because we need to process them as gifts. Some people are using payroll deductions because their wages are being garnished because they didn't make child support payments or they didn't make alimony payments. That is very confidential information. I don't want to know it. You can't control that on the column and row level because it's the same column and the same row. It's the same deal, payroll deduction. So you have to do this, I believe, from a policy standpoint and not from a technology standpoint.
Good point. All right. Do you have an add-on here?
Yeah, you know, I deal with stuff on the exact far end of that spectrum. I mean, the organizations I work with, the boards are usually heavily involved. They're working boards. They are out making cultivation contacts at events and so on. And the comfort level with gathering almost and keeping almost any sort of information is still viewed as creepy, right? They don't want it. The fact that we're asking that we want to keep information like, you know, who other members of their family, of their giving history, both to our organization and to other organizations, you know, where they live, what zip code they live in, anything that can help develop cultivation strategies, board members are incredibly queasy about. And I think it's a comfort level with the data and what the organization needs to do with it to actually move the ball forward as far as that particular prospect. So we're on the complete opposite end of the spectrum and still just trying to help people understand that it's not overly Machiavellian to gather and keep and use that information.
Kai, final thought?
Yeah, we have a very open policy at Columbia of sharing information with anyone who has a business need for that information. So it goes through a little bit of a vetting process. Obviously, if you're coming in as director of development in a particular school, it's a no-brainer. But if you're a departmental administrator in some department somewhere, we'll go through and make sure that there is, in fact, a business need to see these data. But then they have access to all that we've got. Again, we like to think we're all professionals, we're all adults. You have the agreement. It spells out what the uses and misuses of the data would be. And then we rely on trust at that point.
Nancy, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, Tony. Well, I was just thinking about the overall conversation that you're having and where things might be going in the future. And you're talking about sharing information within the institution, but I'm thinking, 20 years from now, what our challenges are going to be and what information are we going to share with our constituents. I think, as a patient, I want to be able to log in and see my medical history. If I'm on Amazon, I can see what I purchased, or if it's iTunes. At some point, when Boeing comes to us or says, I want to see the overall relationship I have with this institution, how are we going to get there, and are we comfortable showing them that history?
Right.
I think
It's the polar problem of what Walt said. We don't have that early history of William Gates Sr., but in 50 years, we're going to have all of that history. And what do we do with it
right.
at that point?
I love a good talk today.
Back here?
Shifting gears just slightly from information retrieval to information collection or data collection. I'm just curious to know what you all think about crowdsourcing information about your donors from across your organization, and if you've done it, what kind of mechanisms you have used, what are some of the issues you've encountered regarding that? Does that make sense?
Anybody?
I mean, acquiring information from other sources?
Exactly. Because, people across your organization, they may have relationships with your donors, they may have information about prospects that you would not, have gotten otherwise. So I'm just curious to know what mechanisms you have had to collect that type of information. If you have any, what the issues surrounding that you may have encountered.
Yeah,
ethical issues.
there are people around here who can answer this better than I can, but we've been doing it for many years. We source just simply, we've done this to find addresses for people, to find phone numbers for people. Now we're doing it to find email addresses for people. We're doing it to find wealth or information about levels of affluence. We do it all the time.
I guess I'm referring to your organization in general, that there are people in your organization who have knowledge or information about your prospects. I guess I'm thinking internally across your organization of what mechanisms
Lilith might have an answer back here.
Well, I'm just going to kind of explain one thing that might help answer that question, is that we don't assign individual donors or individual development officers. You can have multiple, so we do crowdsource because we have a crowd of development officers. And they can all enter information. If you have a contact with someone, regardless of whether they're in your portfolio or not, then they do put it in contact report. And so we are gathering all that information all the time about anyone who has contact.
I'm referring to also outside of the development group, advancement group, but the organization in general at large.
For example, faculty that may not have any
Faculty, exactly.
Mike, you have a
As development people, how do we have the people in our footprint to define their knowledge?
Exactly.
Mike, you have an add on there?
And I think this may be one of the directions that we're headed, but your question is an excellent one, because what databases traditionally do pretty well is if you are interested in someone and want to go look, we can tell you a lot of information about that person, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you have this more generalized idea that I'm interested in people who start working at Weyerhaeuser, or who make a gift or attend an event, and you can't really define who those people are, but you want to know when it happens, I think that's where we have to start heading with the technology. So it's one thing to have people go look and try to find something, but if I can show someone, someone that might be one of your prospects just got a new job somewhere, and a lot of different people can kind of see that in real time and maybe comment on it, and a lot of people can then see those comments and act on it, that's what we have to be trying to do. And I think that's part of why we're focused on these initiatives to capture information from a lot of places and process it in real time, is because it's not because it's important to just have it, it's important to have it and then show it to the people who need to see it. And I think that's the part of the equation that you really have to focus on it's fine to get the information, but if you can't show it to the people who need to see it, it doesn't really matter.
Well, it appears that our time has come to an end, and I know you have some more opportunities to talk about these important issues later today. On behalf of the panel, my UW colleagues, I want to thank you, congratulate you on this great conference, and wish you continued success in your work. Thank you.